It's a case that puts a spotlight on the nation's debate over racial injustice and crime and the safety of New York City's subway. The trial for the man accused of choking a man to death on a New York City subway has begun. You may remember back in May of 2023, there was a widely shared video of a former Marine, Daniel Penny, wrapping his arms around a man's neck, restraining him in a chokehold until he died.
Now that former Marine, who was discharged in 2021, faces charges of manslaughter for the death of Jordan Neely. Penny has pleaded not guilty. His attorneys argue that Penny did not apply enough pressure for the hold to be deadly, while on the other side, prosecutors argue he used excessive force to kill Neely. Neely was 30 years old and worked as a Michael Jackson impersonator. Witnesses said that Neely struggled with drug addiction, mental illness, and homelessness, and had numerous criminal run-ins with the law, had been shouting, throwing things, and acting erratically on the subway train in Manhattan when Penny approached him.
With the help of two other passengers, Penny pinned Neely to the ground and placed him in a chokehold for over 6 minutes until Neely lost consciousness. Witnesses have been mixed as to whether or not they felt personally threatened by Neely, with some saying they were just used to that sort of erratic behavior on the NYC subway. None of the witnesses claimed Neely had a weapon or that he came into physical contact with anyone before Penny approached him.
Neely's death sparked nearly 2 weeks of protests before Manhattan DA Alvin Bragg's office brought an indictment.
All the while, millions of dollars in donation poured in from across the country to help Penny cover his legal costs, including from former presidential candidate Vivek Ramaswamy, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, and former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley. That's all sides of the GOP. They've been showing their support for Penny. The New York City Chief Medical Examiner's officer found that Neely died from compression to his neck as a result of the chokehold. The medical examiner's toxicology report found synthetic cannabinoids were in Neely's system when he died.
Jury selection began Monday and is expected to last 6 weeks. If convicted, Penny faces a maximum of 15 years in prison.
So this is a divisive, debating topic. Obviously, I am conflicted on this one because I do think the level of crime and erratic bad behavior on the New York City subway system I know is an issue, or just the streets of New York City. And this is someone who had been it had 42 prior involvements with law enforcement, including for assaulting 3 different women over a string of time. This was a dangerous, disturbed individual, and if police are unwilling to take action against these kinds of things to actually keep the streets safe, you're going to have citizens taking matters into their own hands. Now, he choked Jordan Neely for a long period of time, and it did result in his death. And you can't just, in my view, you can't just kill someone on the subway because they're acting funny or crazy or something like that. So that's I'm in the middle. I see why people are acting out to counter this kind of thing. I think this kind of thing is totally unacceptable. This clearly was a dangerous person, but I don't know that the actions taken fit the circumstance. Because
someone has mental illness, because somebody acts erratic, because somebody has a record does not mean, as you said, they should be killed by anybody, including the police. You know, they have to try 2 things right now. It's second-degree manslaughter, which means reckless intent. That's the more difficult thing to try. And then criminally negligent homicide, which is the lower burden of proof. The burden that he has right now is he's a former Marine. And he has trained, and this is a Marine expert saying, he was trained, a trainer, to know the degrees of a chokehold and when a chokehold is lethal. And he sat there for 6 minutes holding this man in a chokehold while somebody else assisted him and while the subway car was screaming at him. As a New Yorker, we are very, very used to people coming on the subway and singing and dancing and sometimes yelling, sometimes acting inappropriately. But I think with the jury, as a jury of New Yorkers, probably from all spectrum, are probably going to sit there and say, you know, this man knew what he was doing, he had an intent, maybe he won't be tried on both, but he'll most likely probably be convicted on one. And it's going to be really difficult for, I think, any New Yorker to say it's worth just killing a guy. And, you know, that's why so many New Yorkers got up in arms about this.
It is certainly sad that you all are just living under the expectation that people are going to harass you and yell at you and behave erratically on the subway. That shouldn't be the norm of living in any city. And I think Daniel Penny is a hero because according to the passengers' testimony of what they witnessed on that train, he wasn't just being weird and behaving erratically, he was actively threatening the people on that subway. And Daniel Penny was the only person who who was willing to stand up for them when their police had abandoned them, when their city had abandoned them. He was willing to take action and make sure the people on that train were safe. There was an African-American woman who actually came out and said that she was grateful for Daniel Penny because it was the only time that she felt like somebody was standing up for her and making sure that she was safe while riding the subway. There was another African-American man who assisted Daniel Penny in restraining Jordan Neely, who was not charged with a crime. So, I mean, maybe you could argue that he applied the chokehold too forcefully. Maybe he had adrenaline and didn't realize what he was doing. He held him for 6 minutes because he was waiting for the police to come, because unfortunately that's how long it takes apparently in a New York City subway for police to come to an incident of this nature. And when he realized that Jordan Neely had stopped breathing, he immediately provided medical attention and tried to give CPR to make sure that his life was saved. He was not intending to kill Jordan Neely. He was trying to protect his fellow passengers.
Well, the lawyers are going to have a big burden of proof regardless, as usual, to prove that somebody willfully with intent was planning to kill. But again, he still killed him. And he was a Marine who was trained in this. This wasn't just your average Joe trying to hold down, not knowing it was a chokehold. This was somebody who knows how to kill people. He was a Marine. And, you know, while you mentioned a few people, there were several people that were witnesses that are going to be brought before. They've already, the attorneys have already stated that they're going to bring before witnesses on the train that were the opposite.
It's
so
actually
it
hard.
On both sides.
It's harder than people think from watching TV and movies to engage in the right level of force to not harm. I mean, you can punch someone in the face and kill them. Yeah. You can, you know, we're used to watching TV fights and everything where people beat the crap out of each other and they're fine. Or I love when I hear that, you know, why don't the police ever, or whoever, you know, shoot to wound? You can't shoot to wound. You can't do that. They only shoot to kill, because you can't, unless you're like Jack Bauer, you don't have that level of, even professionally trained people don't have that level of accuracy. So they're always shooting. They're shooting to stop the person from moving or resisting. You don't shoot in the leg, and also you can kill someone from shooting them in the leg. So the idea that he could, you know, if you engage someone physically in this way, there's always some risk, particularly if the person is mentally ill or has drugs in their system or has other things, that it goes wrong. Now, but you know, to your point again, why I am conflicted on this, right? No one on the subway was harmed except Jordan Neely. I understand trying to resist it, but he did die as a result of the actions taken by Daniel Penny. And you know, we all can say that yes, the subway shouldn't be like this, and people shouldn't have to put up with mentally ill people getting in their, which I totally agree with you on. But that doesn't mean you can just kill someone, because it doesn't seem like the right, an appropriate level of response to what the situation was at that time. And
he, again, was trained. So this wasn't your average Joe just acting out and punching. This
but again, even with training, you can.
Well, he knew how to do a chokehold, and the trainer said that a chokehold is very hard. I mean, it's a fine line in a chokehold between death and not death, and he knew that going in. That's the crazy thing about this testimony that they're going to bring forward. I mean,
like this got compared to George Floyd a lot, and that what was so bad in that situation is that it was the police themselves. Exactly. They're sitting on him, and they have handcuffs. They have a police car right there. Right. They could easily. He was no longer any kind of threat to get away from them, and they could have just stopped doing that and put him in the car.
He was selling,
and so that was a big screw up in that case that resulted in his death. This is a little different.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I worry about the precedent that this could set. If the idea is that you protect your fellow passengers from someone who is actively threatening your life by restraining them, and unfortunately the restraint that you use either is held too long, or you cross over that very thin line, as you put it, of applying too much force where you do cut off the airway. Does this say to people, if I defend myself or defend my fellow citizens, I'm going to go to jail for the rest of my life, or for 10, 15 years because I was trying to keep people safe? That's
not his job. You can defend yourself.
But everyone has a right to self-defense, so it actually is his job.
And you can defend other people.
Yes, exactly.
You don't have just the right to defend.
They're not using that defense, which is actually very revealing. That is not the defense that his attorneys are planning to use. So if it were self-defense, that would be one way. But they're not using that. And just to your last point here, the police are everywhere on the subway. As a New Yorker,
not if it took them 6 minutes to get there.
They were moving on the subway,
right?
So you can't.
So they weren't on there. That's
might have
exactly
been in a
the
different
point.
car, but okay. But Amber, you're looking at like sometimes you're on a moving car. If you got in a car accident and the police weren't there right away, yet they were on the corner, does that mean that the police aren't?
Also,
active in
sometimes
the
they just
neighborhood?
don't do anything, even
Yeah,
if they are
exactly.
approximate. I mean, this hasn't been a major.
I mean, you're proving my point by saying, well, the police are everywhere, but they weren't there on that car that day with Daniel Penny and Jordan Neely. And there were other passengers who were grateful that he acted and that he kept
a
them
couple
safe.
passengers who are going to be brought before to testify, and the majority, on the other hand, did not say that.
Wow.
And so I want to say that as a New Yorker, we care about our most vulnerable members in the community, and it's always people from outside of New York who are putting their beliefs on us.
Well, yeah,
We are
because
used
y'all
to
have been
living in a
brainwashed into
it's
thinking
not-
violence is normal.
And it's not just people.
Violence is normal. It's the safest city in America, and it's getting safer over the last 2 years. It's only gotten safer.
That's not what the FBI said.
The FBI said that, yes, this year.
They just
actually.
revised their
They
statistics.
did revise the statistics.
Violent crime or petty crime? That's what I'd like to know.
Violent crime.
Murder?
Yeah, violent crime is up in pretty much every American city, according to the FBI revised statistics.
All right, we have to leave it there. Coming up next, we've got another New York-centric story. The Central Park Five are suing Donald Trump. Stay tuned for more Rising.